Welcome to the Find Your Voice, Change Your Life podcast with psychologist Dr. Doreen Downing. Listen in as Doreen interviews people who felt they didn't have a voice or who suffered extreme speaking anxiety. You'll hear stories about how they struggled to speak up, what they did to find their authentic voice, and the confidence they now feel to speak up and make an impact. If you want to get started right away to find your voice, download Doreen's free 7-step guide to fearless speaking at doreen7steps.com. And now, here is Doreen.
Hi, this is Dr. Doreen Downing, host and psychologist here on the Find Your Voice, Change Your Life podcast. What I do is to invite guests who have had some kind of struggle with speaking up in public. It's usually because they don't have a voice for some reason, and I'm very curious about what happened. Were they born that way? Did something happen early on in life? Was it growing up in a particular family where there were challenges? Was it school? Was it bullying? There are so many reasons that help people like us coaches out there that help people find their voice. But there are also so many reasons that people either don't find their voice, lose it. But what happens on this podcast is that it seems that the people who join me get to tell their story, not only of their struggle, but what was the journey to find their voice. And that's what I find so inspirational for my leaders, is that it is possible. If you're listening and you feel like you don't have a voice, you'll find all sorts of hints, techniques, paths from my guests. And today I get to interview Tressa Berman. Let me call her Dr. Tressa Berman, who's an experienced coach, teacher, and author in the creative field. And as an anthropologist and former college professor, she has mentored thousands of artists, designers, makers, and dreamers to realize their potential and share their talents with the world. Oh, that sounds so refreshing. I can't wait to get our conversation going, Tressa. You're also a transformational guide, and you learned how to heal yourself through meditation and contemplation in more than 30 years of practice with Buddhist teachers and Indigenous healers. Well, we could have a whole conversation just on that, can't we? Oh my goodness, I can't wait. Her vision is to co-create a more conscious and responsive world through creativity, and her passion is to help others to unleash their fully expressed creative potential. Welcome.
Hi, yes, thanks so much, Doreen. It's just so exciting to be sitting here with you in the Zoomosphere, but it's also a very intimate space and so much that we could share. So I'm excited to, let you take the lead and see where we go with it.
I like what you just said, take the lead and see where we go, because the questions and people who listen to the podcast know that it's all pretty organic. Yes, there's a pattern. Tell us about the struggle, and then tell us about what you discovered, and tell us what you do nowadays. But something I just read was it touched me deeply about your passion, and it's to help others unleash their fully expressed creative potential. And I know that's where we're going to be going today. So listeners, hold on, because you're going to learn so much from Dr. Tressa today. And but let's start way back when. I know you've sent me some information. You were a child performer of all things. So let's hear some about the early beginnings about you and your voice.
Yes, well, first of all, thank you, and welcome to all the listeners and would-be listeners and will be listening. Want to just say the tagline that I offered earlier about fully expressed creative potential, I realize now, just as you said, organically, and being in this space, that really it's about your fully expressed creative voice. So we could just put that right at the forefront as the driver for the conversation, because that's really what my work truly is about and how I find my seat here in the room with you. So you wanted me to speak to some early beginnings. Is that how we go? So
Yeah, please.
yeah, so this whole question of voice is so fascinating to me, something I have been grappling with my entire life, truly, because when I say child performer, what I mean by that is that I was a singer and songwriter and performer, and I had the great privilege of going as a scholarship student to music school in New York, where I grew up, and had the wonderful opportunity to meet with so many other creatives. I was very young, starting, say, at 11 years old, and I really wasn't quite sure of the milieu in which I found myself. I just knew that it felt like home to be in a circle of so many creatives, most of whom were much older than myself. So I was learning. At the same time, I was not discerning, because I was really too young to have acquired those skills, or at least, let's just say, my incarnation at 11 years old was still youthful soul trying to find its way. There may be 11-year-olds out there that are, much more aware than I was at that age. So finding one's voice, what I love about this is that, thinking about it, of course, in anticipation of our talk today, and I've been thinking about the different voices that we have at different stages of our lives, also in different roles. So while I may have been honing and practicing and developing a performing voice, it was really a persona, now that I think about it. And as a persona, it had the effect of what Trungpa Rinpoche, the late great Buddhist teacher, calls a spiritual bypass. It had the effect of having a spiritual bypass by developing a particular performance persona, almost at the expense, I want to say, of a deeper development of self. And I have found, as someone who works a lot with creative artists my whole life, and performing artists, that this is not uncommon. It's like where you put your attention is what grows. So if we put our attention on developing our outer layers of relationality, then the attention and the intention is not necessarily going into our inner development. So it took me a very long time to awaken to that in some respects, even though I always thought that I was extremely precocious, because that's what all my teachers and mentors told me.
Yeah, they were a mirror to you in what you were developing, growing. If there's some kind of I would say applause or some kind of acceptance, encouragement for that outer shell that you are showing in that image, it seems like, especially youngsters, ooh, yeah, I want more. Let me do more so I could get that kind of, applause from these grown-ups.
Yes, and also because, again, we come from many different contexts, and hence that's where I come to the thinking out loud with you about the different voices and forms of expression that come from different contexts. As a young person, we're probably most influenced by our home environment, our families of origin, or even if we are not in our families of origin, then the households in which we find ourselves placed, because a lot of children grow up in homes that are not their biological families of origin. So I want to honor that reality and their reality, because so much about finding one's voice, if I may kind of slide into another metaphor about voice, is also about being seen. So finding our voice is as much about being heard and seen. So that's why I think, as you so acutely point out, and as I so appreciate your psychological insights into this, because yes, it's true. As young people, we often tend to go to the approval ratings, 5 stars, the like button, and
we still do. That's what you're saying, don't we? Even as adults, it's like how many people liked my post today, or thumbs up. Yeah, it's something that motivates us, is the acceptance of others who go yes to us.
Yes. And so part of this idea of multiplicity of voices, that we may have many voices over a lifetime, or we may have different voices for different circumstances, is also about identity and claiming who we are with our voice. And I think for me, part of the process of maturing and my own spiritual development that came alongside, but then more systematically later, because I always had that calling. I just didn't know what it was that I was hearing. So I had to fine tune my listening in order to respond to the calling. In fact, I think, having said that I would share with you my arising thought, which is that I think that finding your voice is about responding to your calling.
Mm-hmm. That's, I would like to hear a little bit more about that. But first, as long as you've got that word, I'd like to put a plug in for a wonderful book called Callings, Finding and Living Your Authentic Life. And the author is Greg Lavoie. And that's Levoy, Greg Lavoie. And I think that when I love the idea of callings and the little signs that are there every single day. And so I'd like to hear more about what you say about callings.
Yeah, so I think I started there with my music and performance background in early life, because my journey was not direct from there, or so it seems. Oftentimes a retrospective view, things make more sense, but as we're going through it, we often do the somersaults of confusion and lack of clarity, which is a form of confusion, and facing our obstacles and saboteurs, which is what I work with my clients on in our creative work, which I call transformational creative coaching. So I just come back to that maybe a little bit later. But I think the point that I want to jump cut to for your listeners, in with respect for your question about my journey, is that I didn't follow that musical calling. I did not follow it directly. I was influenced very much, I think, by a family of origin where there was a lot of chaos. Okay, I'm a child of divorce. There was a lot of brokenness and attempts to repair within new family structures, and things that worked that didn't work, and absences, and being a young person coming to terms with that, not knowing quite how. So I responded, like many humans do, to stressful situations from the limbic brain, which is fight or flight, and I left. So I left home at a very young age. I just turned 16. I left from New York, moved to San Francisco, where I had spent 2 summers prior. So in a way, I already had started leaving home when I was 14, and then 15. And then finally, hearkening back to that so-called precociousness that some of my teachers had seen, I did know how to work the system. Let me say that. So I worked the system so that I could actually double up, graduate early, and get the hell out of there. There being my hometown in New York, to start my life at 16 years old, a default emancipated minor, right? So there I was, and I started college at 16. So the reason I mention all that is not to, bore people to tears with my with my diaries, which as a writer, of course, I have, a whole room full of journals that someday will make a great bonfire or book. We'll see. But
that's a title in itself of a book. Is it a bonfire or is it a book?
Exactly.
That's the title of a book.
Yeah, thank you. No, I work with that as a writer and author. Whenever I can see the title, I know the book is already written. That's how I work, and that's also how I work with my clients, from inspired vision to reverse engineer to inhabit it and actually become it, live it, and be it. So, I keep coming back up to the present because this is where we are in the present moment. But just to kind of fast forward to say that because I started on that academic track so young, really, that was where I found security. That was where I got self-esteem. That was where I found believing mirrors, people who kept saying, yeah, you really got this, because they were responding to the outer result, to the product, and still inside, I was incomplete. I was incomplete because I was choosing, I was making bad choices in relationships. So I would say bad boys are bad choices. Same difference.
And can I just tell you that I feel like I am listening to myself. You are telling my story. I am enjoying this so much, hearing it come out of you in terms of the struggle to have that kind of identity. And I was a PhD student all the way, for 26 years I was in school, and that's where I got my identity. But the inner, and that's partly what this whole program is about, is finding your voice. And it sounds like your journey is similar, like what's inside, that you were not connected to the healthiest parts of you yet.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks. And the yet is, where the rubber hits the road, that's where the soul connection lies. And so I just want to say, for those who may be listening and can't see, that you and I are both smiling, we're both beaming, we're both acknowledging with we're both seeing each other, which is what I was referencing before. The power of being seen and heard is how we recognize our voice. So it's not just finding our voice, but I think that there are patterns of voice recognition, and it's not only computational, it's also affective and emotional and responsive. So my hope is that our story, Doreen, where we resonate, also is the story of whoever is listening, because we all, as humans, I think at some point or another, share in the story of how do we come to our breakthroughs from points of relative to major to epic breakdowns. So one of the workshops I teach, for example, is called From Breakdown to Breakthrough. So I know of what I speak because I have had both, just run of the mill, daily breakdowns, like, oh, I'm too tired to even do this today, that feeling, and how to redirect energy and also to harness energy, to epic breakdowns, which is what I'm leading up to on my academic track. So I won't take you all the way through from beginning to end, because we've already ascertained, yes, she finally went on and got her PhD, and then what? Because then that security of having the handrail of academia, if you will, next step. There was never any question. Yes, I'm going to keep going. Yes, I'm going to keep going. And then the academic job search, it's very predictable in a way, even though the vagaries of it make it not necessarily achievable for many or most, because of how things have shifted from how they were years ago, when it was almost a guarantee that if you had a PhD, you would get a job, which is no longer the case, of course. And so So there I went, and I got an academic job, I'm happy to say. And something happened, Doreen, something happened that I believe now was cumulative in all those steps from my creative beginnings through my academic achievements and going on and through a series of unhealthy relationships and trying to piece myself through it all. I had a breakdown.
Yeah, you said it was going to be epic, so here it is. Wow.
So there was one, right? So what happened, so there I was an assistant professor, and I was turned on to this Zen master. His name was Sasaki Roshi. He brought Rinzai Zen to the United States back in the early 60s. And I was studying with him when he was already very well established and had centers internationally. He was in his 80s at the time, and he lived to be 107. So he had a practice center in the city where I was teaching. So I started practicing there. And that in itself, as you said, there's so many stories within stories, but I just want to ramp it up to say that I blame Zen for me leaving academia.
All right. I think Zen can handle that.
Which is, funny in and of itself, because, no blame, no shame. But really what happened there, Doreen, and for whoever is listening, that something cracked open that needed to crack open. So what felt like a breakdown, and believe me, it wasn't pleasant, nonetheless, drove me to my healing, drove me to seek those inner workings that weren't working at all. I only thought that they were working because they got me through the assembly line of accolades. Okay. And something was deeply missing. So in my spiritual practices, now I have actually 2 lay ordinations in 2 Buddhist traditions, and I teach meditation at a temple here where I live. And my years of working as an anthropologist in Indigenous communities around the world, and the learnings that were imparted to me through those teachers, have all infused my understandings, as well as now, of course, 25 years of teaching art and creative studies that I bring to what I call transformational creative coaching.
Mm-hmm. As soon as you said healing, and those people who are listening could hear the tone, your tone changed as soon as you stepped into saying healing.
Yeah.
Ooh, it was, I feel it in my body. It's a vibration of sound that is very powerful. And so you are a healer. You are a healer, aren't you? And so, yeah, so tell us more about what you do now that it feels like you left a situation that seemed like it was your calling, but it wasn't, several times. But then you found it, I would say, and from your voice, where you went was a deeper calling.
Thank you. Yes, and thank you for acknowledging that. I love wordplay, as a writer. So I often have said to myself, maybe it's the first time I'll say it out loud, hearing is healing.
Mm.
So you hearing me and feeling me. So it's hearing and feeling is healing.
Yes.
And, with that in mind too, one thing I learned in facing myself in the Zendo, which is the meditation hall and Zen centers, some practices actually face the wall, is the power of silence. So I think it's very interesting, as I was thinking about this as a creative conversation about finding your voice, that sometimes the appropriate response can be silence, and that to listen to both the inner voice. So another aspect of voice is the inner voice, and also to listen to the voice that's greater than ourselves. In Buddhist practice, some might call it Buddha mind, some might call it our true nature. I sometimes even just say source or great spirit, creator. That when we can quiet the mind and listen to that voice, then we connect our inner voice. And from that connection, we're able to speak our truth.
Yes. And the truth comes from source. It doesn't come from trying to please. It doesn't come from impressing or making ourselves something bigger than we are. I feel in listening to you, it's like a surrender to truth, what's true inside of us. And then our voice comes from there.
Yes, and I love what you said about surrender, because what came up for me when you said the word is letting go. And letting go, in my experience, is probably the fundamental practice of all spiritual practice. Because ultimately that is our, that is what we are ultimately called to do, right? To let go. So we talk a lot of coaches talk about, letting go of what no longer serves you. But, come the time where our life cycle is complete, however that may occur, is very individual and mostly unknown. Then we get to let go of the body that no longer serves us. So, it's a very delicate walk. We're very fragile, strong, courageous human beings. And I think, that is the voice from which I speak as a human being that has done a lot of work, in this realm, to be able to, sit in the seat as a guide to encourage, support, and catalyze the work of others.
Wow, not only just encourage, but the word you use right now, catalyze, because that's an energy. And I think that, I know I do this, but I feel you do too, is that in this listening that you're talking about, people get to hear themselves more.
Yes, it's always about what is your calling. I can only be accountable to my calling. You can only be accountable to your calling. Where we get derailed often is when we, and you mentioned in terms of people pleasing, and I consider that a saboteur of the things that can come up in the process of being true to our calling. Where we get derailed is when we try to live for the benefit of, I don't want to say benefit, but live for the approval of others. Because, in Buddhist practice, we actually vow to practice for the benefit of all beings. But we can only practice for the benefit of all beings if we are practicing our own practice. We can't practice somebody else's practice for the benefit of all beings.
Yeah, I like what you're saying around deeper connection and the knowing of who you are, what you are, where the source is inside of yourself, tapping into that. And I know you used several words for it that seemed on the verge of sacred. And I would say that that's true for me too. I call it essence. And that's why I call my business essential speaking, because it's once you tap into the essence of who you are, which is what you're talking about, the source, the spirit, then the speaking comes from that truth, that essence. And we're nearing the end of our time together. So I want to give you an opportunity to describe a little bit more about how you work with people, which I think would be great because you've already shown people that you are a holder of possibility.
Thank you. That's beautiful. I'll take the hashtag. Yeah, well, okay. Thanks for the opportunity. As far as transformational creative coaching work, as we've been talking about, and I think, demonstrating through our conversation, that the way in which we articulate our voice is an aspect of communion. So that communion is what you refer to as the sacred, because it's a synergy that requires one and another, even if that other is a calling to our higher source. So we are connected, and we are inextricably interconnected. And from that standpoint, the transformational part of the work that I do is really the large part of the work that I do as a creative coach, guide, and teacher. That really is the why. So it's a discovery process. It's a mutual discovery process as to what is your why. And we go from there to identify the obstacles and identify the saboteurs and find ways to work with, work around, work through, or redirect to come to the creative, okay, which is yours, whatever, as we've been talking about, each person's creative expression is their own unique form. And then the coaching part is how I facilitate, is how I help guide with the tools and methods that I've developed in 30 years of teaching, Doreen. So I bring those together with my spiritual practices and learnings to something I call the creative curriculum. So I teach something I call the creative curriculum as a 6 to 8 week training. And I want to offer right here and now on your show today a small taste of what that could be, because I just decided last week to roll out a mini session. I'm calling it a solstice session that we're just going to do in 3 short weeks. It's super, super, super affordable. If like you can afford a latte, and then you can afford this mini session.
Tell us.
So it's just going to be 3 weeks in December, where we're going to have you get me live, just like I'm talking to you live right now. You bring your métier, your creativity, whatever that may be. And I want to say this is for all kinds of creatives. Yes, I work with artists and writers, creative healers, and also, mothers and lawyers, and, the creative process knows no bounds. Okay. So whatever it is, bring it to the table. So we're going to do a very quick but deep dive into one aspect of that. I'm going to give you something to work on, and then we're going to come back to it before the solstice, and then we're going to have a solstice celebration around it. So I really hope to see some of you there, and yourself more than welcome. Anyone, everyone listening, all levels, everyone welcome. So you can find out more about it simply by emailing me. Just email me. You can also book a laser exploration call with me so that we can, get a little bit of background about what it is you want to work on. And that's all I'll say for now. I would just hope to make this offering available for whoever feels inspired or called to take me up on it. That's why I'm here. That's why I do what I do, to be of service.
And what is the email they can use?
So my email is tressa@transformationalcreativecoaching.com. You may have to put some hyphen in, but I think it comes through either way. Tressa@transformational-creative-coaching.com. And same for the website. You can just go to the website, transformationalcreativecoaching.com, and you can find me and my email and more about my work there.
Great. I think one of the last lines that I'm taking with me is just what you said. Creative process has no bounds. That to me feels like our potential is limitless.
Yes. Yes, Doreen, hearkening back to what you said about possibilities, so when we clear the mind of what we think we need to do or should, that forbidden word, what opens up is a sacred space of possibility. And that's where we work from, what I call the creative unconscious. So that's what the work is about, tapping into that and bringing it forward into form, whatever your form is.
Great. And my form is giving you a platform like we did today. And this has been a creative process, a joint kind of both of us dancing in the moment to see what comes through us as teachers, as guides, as coaches, as possibility makers.
I love it. Yes, dancing in the moment of possibility. Another title for another book.
We'll co-write it. Thank you. Thank you, Tressa.
Thank you so much. Blessings to everyone.
Thank you for being with us today for this episode of Find Your Voice, Change Your Life. Each person Doreen interviews shares what has helped them find their voice. You can learn from these guests and find your voice so you can be confident to speak up and speak out. And remember to download Doreen's free 7-step guide to fearless speaking at doreen7steps.com. We hope you enjoyed the show and will return next time. Until then, goodbye for now.